Hey, everybody, welcome out to the AI Think Tank podcast. This is show number 4. And today we'll be talking with Tim Rohrbaugh about cybersecurity, AI, and on-prem LLM deployments. And he's in New York right now. I'm in Seattle. So this is a coast to coast episode. How's it going, Tim?
Oh, it's going great.
Great to see you. Yeah. So it was wonderful to talk to you the other day. And I'm really happy that you could make some time for us today on the show. So how's it going? And what have you been up to lately?
It's been very interesting. Yeah, I'll give the people who are listening just a little bit of background.
Uh,
And it'll kind of lead into how's it going today.
yeah.
Um, I started out about 12 years. By the way, this is an example of never planning your career because forget it, you don't know where you're going to go. I started out in the Navy, avionics, went to government consulting after that, and then after about 12 years combined, I left and went commercial. And I could say that maybe during that time, moving from avionics to computer security and government contracts to very specific areas, I still didn't really know where I was going to go with my career. And I did actually get on a project back in the 90s with coming back to partially to our discussion with an AI tool set called Ginsum that I was exposed to. It cooked everything for control systems. It controlled the Nestle cookies
Mhm.
production line to the space shuttle. Okay, so it was used across the board in control systems. And then, I spent probably 15 of the last 20 years as a public company CISO, head of product, CIO, and the last place I was a CISO, head of security for an airline, JetBlue, and then I happened to leave just at the point where OpenAI, was releasing. All I knew was a chat interface at the time,
Right.
and I had played around with the idea of using ML. A lot of the products claimed that they used it. Worked with some folks on that side to see if it was applicable to the cyber arena, but never really saw much. But then my leaving coincided with a bunch of free time and OpenAI, like many of us. And I found myself just totally sucked in. And I absolutely love the technology, all the things that come from it, which we'll talk about. But that has been my 7 days a week just for fun pursuit.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that system that you were talking about back in the 90s, what was that called again?
Ginsum.
Okay. Gotcha. So,
I think it was two PhDs created a platform, Lisp and Prolog, right? And created a platform with a very easy interface for experts to create rules and fact tables. It had a neural network as part of it, right? This is all the early on stuff. We call it traditional AI. And
right.
then, obviously everything changed around 2010,
Mhm.
and then massively in 2017.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Big jumps. So, yeah, but that's amazing that you have a history that goes that deep into it. So you've had your hand on it for quite a while, and to see everything happen in the last few years really got me excited and excelled. Just really gave me a springboard for a lot of my projects, which did good. So here we are.
Well,
Yeah.
I got to say though, you say I've had my hand on it. I got to tell you that I try to tell people like I've been out there just kind of evangelizing what
Mhm.
it is that we're going to talk about. And I always give my background to start with to actually illustrate that I have no background in this, right? I
Yeah.
shouldn't have any opinion. And that's an important point because this is one of those rare moments in time where a technology has quickly shifted to the applied arena,
Right.
meaning that it's there for us. You
Hmm.
don't need to be a data scientist. You don't need to be just like you don't need to be a neuroscientist to be a human, right? We know how to use the human brain.
That's right.
We don't need to have the academic
Uh,
background or what's being learned every day.
right. Exactly. It's like the race car analogy. You keep your eyes on the road. You don't have to understand how the fuel burns to win the race. Okay. So,
Yeah, exactly.
all right. Yeah. So today, I know you have some things to share with us, but let's ease into that because security and managing data in a safe manner is first and foremost on the table right now, with everything going on and at all levels for all people. What are you seeing right now in terms of security holes and needs out there for what's going on in AI deployments and better cybersecurity practices that are, coming into play for this? I mean, what are you experiencing right now?
So I come at this, and I think I probably need to explain two of the things in the way that I think. And I think probably this hit me after a number of years of being in a senior role in security, is that we start to communicate like we all know what each other's thinking.
Mhm.
And this, like everything else, is a game of nuance, right? It's a lot of gray area in nothing's binary. And so I found myself learning to present, learning to communicate, because we're constantly challenged, and especially with those that don't have necessarily the exact same schema in their brain.
Mhm.
A good book is Made to Stick by the Heath brothers, which he illustrates some of this. So I
Uh-huh.
quit using the word risk. Like, if you're working in a financial services area, you're going to have to use it. But by and large, I realize that a lot of people have, and everybody, even professionals, have a different schema in their brain when you use it, and so there's an opportunity to miscommunicate. It's
Right.
along the same lines of AI. Like, I have gotten to the point where I don't use the acronym, or if I do, I'll almost apologize, because there's traditional, and then there's a lot of disciplines. For people on here who probably know that machine learning came first, deep learning, and what we're talking about, Gen AI, generative transformers, is a subset of that. And so that's something very specific. And I think one of the things that people miss is that two parties can say the same thing, both be right, but both be wrong at the exact same time.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so when we talk about Gen AI, it is unlike any other computing technology, compute platform in human history. In other words, it's not about precision.
Right.
And that's something I'm sure we'll get into later. But if it's different, then that means that I need to use terms that distinguish it from everything else.
Right.
In security, people still think in many cases that it's a science. Cybersecurity, information security, information assurance, all the precursors to this, even OPSEC, all this. It's not science, it's art. And one of the reasons is because we are battling against humans who are immensely creative. And so art matching up with something that's not about precision happens to marry really well together. And
Mhm.
so our problems in cyber have to do with the amount of data that we're dealing with, the rapid advancement, and the creativity of the enemy, the adversary.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, pen testing and protecting systems goes hand in hand. And I know I've had to put a lot of work into testing bots and other things like that. And, just right down to the code I'm writing and improving it to maintain a just better performance overall and less bugs and, just security at every level. But where you're coming from is a slightly different world than I am. So I think that your insights here are gonna be key to a lot of people's success going down the road, at least for perspective and the way to approach this overall. Because many companies right now they want to use their data in different ways, and they want different departments to use it in different ways, and all of a sudden, people, things are opening up in a way that's needs some consideration. So what do you think right now? Moving forward for a lot of these companies, what's the value in where is the value for the order of this, okay, and where we're going in security?
This is one of those things again that two people can say the same thing and both be right and both be wrong. So the regulators, and there's a lot of people out there who say they'll generalize, right? And that's usually a giveaway that they're not being specific. They'll say there is risks associated with AI using it. exposing data, regulatory environment wants to get in, and everything else that comes from the regulator's point of view. In a sense, that's right, but in a sense, they're 100% wrong. In fact, they're so wrong that I'll make a different statement, and that is that Gen AI, okay, is the greatest privacy tool in human history, or at least since the internet was created. Now,
Hmm.
how can we both be right and both be wrong? Because I said that, but then I didn't add a little piece to my statement, and that is using open models, okay,
Hmm.
privately, right,
Yeah.
is the greatest privacy tool available to us because we have been spreading, okay,
Yeah.
our daily thoughts through Google search, through websites, through Discord, through all of that, including, our technical pursuits, our problems, everything. We've been just placing it out there. And all of a sudden, we can grab this, let's just say it, this sphere of human knowledge, all potentially or close to all human knowledge, bring it inside and not go out for what's randomly, you know, a question on our mind.
Right.
And then we can add in things like, manuals and other stuff in our local context. And we've now protected our thoughts, our
Mm.
work from going out. That's one of the greatest privacy tools I've
Yeah.
seen.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's wonderful. And there's so many good open models right now that, especially what we looked at the other day, I mean, quantized, more effective, faster, more specialized models that aren't meant to do everything, but are really good at some things that save you time and money. And of course, spare you the risks of, exposure.
I think, yeah, you said something there, specialized. So, you
Mhm.
know, look at the battle, use the battle of Silicon, right? Computing platforms as one of those historical events and current that kind of illustrates where some of this might be. And that is that, we were going under Intel view of centralized processor, kind of like a skilled at everything. And then you have Jensen come along and say, well, I don't think that's the way it's going to go. I'm going to go
Yeah.
specialize floating point transactions, calculations. And so,
Uh,
and then he said recently, right, that, he really believes that, specialized silicon. And when I look at the pursuit of these big dollar models trying to become multimodal, there's a cost to that.
mhm.
And there's something to be said for open and focused on a very specific text completion tool, an
Yes.
ask.
Uh-huh. Right, right. And that's what you were saying the other day is it's too much. It's just too much erroneous compute being used to do the simple thing. I mean, a calculation is deductive,
Why do
but its speculation can cost a lot of money, and probability, of course, is going to weigh more. But in this
that
case, it's so much more to do something simple.
this is just
Yeah.
my opinion, but I'll tell you I'm taking it from things that I've seen in the past. Like I love Hugging Face and I love, what they're doing with respect to the open source community. But the leaderboards, or even the concept of a leaderboard is misplaced. But
Yeah.
in generally. But the thing specifically of a leaderboard associated with a model's ability to test in math, okay, that's great. But that's not what it should be used for. We
Mm.
have this little piece of software on our computers or on our phone called a calculator.
Right.
And it takes almost no energy to get an accurate answer every time,
Right.
but you're going to get an inaccurate answer, right, from something that is generalized, a neural network that is generalized for a different task. So
Right.
use the right tool in the future agentic, we'll get into this later, agentic pipelines, but
Right.
find the right tool, in other words, call the function, call the application for something that is precision like that.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, some things are going to be better at summarizing. Some things are going to be better at, managing, I guess, some math. But honestly, I mean, even on the back end at OpenAI, they have a sandboxed Python environment. It's like a scratch pad for the LLM to actually interact with math indirectly to use, actual Python libraries to do that. So, and that's just passing off user attributes and probably a JSON interchange to actual Python code. And guess what? The LLM isn't doing any math. It's just passing those values to the script below it. But even then, things can go wonky, and there's no reason to have such a large model do that even, right? So, and I know that I mean, you can, all right, I don't want to ruin anything here. So you keep going, okay? Because we had a great conversation the other day. You got me worked up here. So
No. It's I love, there's so much creative thinking going on right
yeah.
now. And, we have to go back to what is the original purpose or best use of a general transformer. And I don't know if everybody knows here on this what it is, but let me be specific before we explain it. But a general transformer, you know, what is it that it's best used for? And why do I think it's the greatest piece of technology, and it's going to be around for the next 25 years for sure, as a component of the
Mhm.
future AGI? And that is that it is akin to us. It's akin to, the neural network is human knowledge, immensely creative and potentially pretty good reasoning on lots of things. But it's flawed, just like some of the information that went in. It
Mhm.
doesn't know anything about language. It'll never have common sense.
Right.
Um, you know, it's it, but it's still massively useful if it's done in the right way. So it's how you connect it with other things that kind
Mhm.
of matches up with what we do in our brain, which
Right.
then allows it to be the other AI,
Yeah.
augmented intelligence.
Uh-huh. It's like that predictive reasoning that sets us apart from it. It's predictive, but to a degree we predict too, but we're feeling in the moment. And if you think, oh, I might slip on this ledge, you could predict it by looking and seeing how close you are to something, or maybe thinking about the statistics of someone slipping on a ledge that steep. But also you can feel it in real time, and that feedback loop is what gives us our edge over something that's strictly predictive reasoning, which isn't, again, really not reasoning at all. It just seems like it. It's just transforming and coming up with the next word. Um,
It's the contribution for us. You said something a second ago there with respect to like relating it to us. It's the contribution of nurture and nature, right? And my background, which I stumbled into avionics, Navy, as just a technician, right? I'm trying to fix things. That's what you're taught, to fix things. So you're taught as a primary function, like how to troubleshoot.
yes.
And in fact, you're taught electron theory backwards within the
Mhm.
flow. And it's not important unless you're into the engineering side specifically to creating, but there's a reason why, for helping, especially with troubleshooting. So I don't know why I fix problems the way that I do today, or I look at them, but I know that some of my background contributes.
Yeah.
So for us, when we take a general model and we give it this massive human knowledge, and let's say we're not putting any filter on it yet, or any specific, you know, as they say, attention mechanism, then who knows how it's going to reason. And so then it's up to us to coax the right reasoning capabilities out of it.
Right, right. And you used a term in our conversation on Monday that was inbound. Um, it was a type
Filter.
of prompt, but yeah, go ahead. Let's talk about that for a moment. I thought that was a very interesting perspective, a really powerful perspective. And uh,
I I first off, the concept of prompt engineering, it's a nice one and it's important, but the precision with which they're trying to get out of it, as it applies across the board, we know doesn't work,
mhm,
because it's the technique though does. And the reason that it doesn't work the same way every time is because every model's different. And what you're doing with your words, like you're going from a zero shot, this model, this neural network that's just sitting there ready to be the text completion tool that it is.
mhm,
And then you need to manipulate the neural network, but
yeah,
you can't actually go into it, through weights and programming and da da da. You have little tweaks, but you can actually put an inbound filter on the neural network, inbound all of the information that was trained on. You can put an inbound filter with your words.
mhm,
So if I say, I want you to respond as a 1870s fiction author,
Mhm.
then the neural network is going to take the training that came maybe partially out of Gutenberg library, and then the reasoning, in other words, the text completion that it's going to do in the next statement is going to be based off of a reconfigured neural network in a way. Okay.
Yeah.
And so where I put it into a role, I might say, or you're going to respond as a senior cybersecurity analyst with a background in aviation and, maybe a strong understanding of network, blah, 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 blah. Okay. What's happening is anything that I say afterwards, it's going to be reasoned and responded to as a portion of that neural network.
Right. Right. You're getting
So I
special.
think of the role as the inbound filter to the
Uh-huh.
neural network, inbound to the knowledge that's in there, and then let it
Mhm.
respond.
Yeah, you're trying to really drill down into what you want, get that those special parts, that special focus. I mean, and I know you'll talk about this, but I just want to say it was really great on Monday to see you interview live with me using Olama on your own hardware, these bots and for particular tasks. And I'll tell you what, everybody, I mean, Tim was able to sort it out and further find ways to make it more specialized and with very little effort. And it was fast. And I don't know what kind of you know computer systems you're running some of these on at home, but I know they're not big rack unit servers. We're talking about standard PC architecture, or even a Mac, anything like that. And it was phenomenal. But and I got to watch that live. So this interview process is really a great concept and something if you're building a bot from scratch, you still have to think this way. But if you're going to engage something large, you could save a lot of time by using that inbound filter, like Tim's talking about. It's nothing nothing like groundbreaking from normal prompting until you start realizing what it really does when you do that and how it selects those parts and makes with less compute better results in some cases. Is that the best way I can put that there?
Yeah, well, yes, and by the way, this is coming from like a lot of missteps and a lot of just we learn by playing, but we also come up with discoveries by playing.
Yeah,
And so there are problems in cyber. The best thing to do with Gen AI is to apply it to problems that that you thought you couldn't solve in the past, because you didn't have the labor, you couldn't do it
absolutely.
24/7. So,
Uh,
and we'll get into cognitive biases and why you apply it. But let's just say in every one of those, one of the things that you have to do is first stop, write down what is the chain of thought that I use to go from, inputs to a
mhm.
decision. And in there, if you put yourself in a swim lane, right, and you have yourself going out to do different things or to whatever, you end up finding that you're pulling on, like, I'm pulling on my knowledge as a DBA, I'm pulling on my knowledge as, a network engineer, I'm pulling on my knowledge of whatever. Create a different swim lane for that, and then think, wouldn't it be nice if the model actually worked
Yeah, yeah.
with that same type of reasoning.
Uh-huh.
And so then you take all of those models that we have access to. There's what was it, 620,000 right now, potentially. There's much less with respect on Hugging Face for, the job, text completion, large language, whatever. But take those and then interview them for the role, just like you would interview an employee. So you say, you know, here's your role. The first thing that most of the models do today, if they're just have a slight bit of training with respect to chat, they're going to spit back, hallucinate, which I think is a positive. They're going to spit back what they think their responsibilities are and how it lines up against what they know.
Right.
And then you get a chance to say, well, that's good, but I think you should also be responsible for this or not
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, right.
How would you approach this problem?
Mhm.
And then maybe I'd say, well, give me an example of a very difficult problem that you solved in the past. Just typical
Mhm.
interview question. See what it
Right.
says. And I
Uh-huh.
found that interview process gives me a better understanding of when I feed it a little context and a job, that
Mhm.
it's going to give me reasoning closer to what I would expect or what is
Right.
helpful.
Kind of helps you verify. its competence at that, I mean, we went through this weeks and weeks and weeks ago, and a lot of my MIT cohort can attest to this, but we were taking code requests and feeding it to different models, like a bot that I made just for Python integrations, okay, on OpenAI, or Copilot, or Bard, or any other models out there, and we were testing the same prompt. Hey, please create Python script using tkinter to produce blah blah blah, this and that, right?
Mhm.
And more than not, one of them always got it right. And so we would use that to do other work, and see. But they all had different shortcomings. I mean, all of this is still in its infancy, is even though it's so profoundly powerful already, it's still, there's a lot to work out. But I liked what the stern talk you gave me, which was, Dan, you should use your own local models to do this. And that it's actually, especially for something like coding that's way more specialized, it makes more sense. And so that's sage advice, I feel like, because whether or not company XYZ claims that they're not going to train their models when you use their API, that doesn't mean they're not looking at your data. That doesn't mean that just because
It's not
it's,
there in a log file.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So there's that. And that was a good point, and something that is the first step in security, which is, if you don't have to send it out, absolutely don't do that. It makes no
I
sense.
I have been spending my time, this has been like a daily pursuit, let's say roughly about 9 months. Okay. And I'm 7 days a week, you just kind of get lost in it all. But I
Mhm.
take time and I try to explain to cyber teams. Like I'll call CISOs I know and say, do you want me to talk with your team and explain how to do all this locally, what this means, get them to a certain level in a couple hours.
Right.
And my hope is, like, first off, the team that absolutely should never use Google, anything proprietary, open, another vendor to send their thoughts, their questions, their whatever, is a cyber team. And
Right.
so we don't need another vendor most of the time because, especially not to just give this stuff away. And so I show them how to do this locally, and that there's infinitesimal difference between a local model that you select
Mhm.
and, one that's 4, 5, 10 times size parameters, um, that's proprietary on the outside. And besides which, you get to control it
Mhm.
completely. And my hopes is that this, number one, is they'll get it and they'll use it internally. And then when it really hits them and they're like, holy cow, the rest of our company is like spreading all of their information out to
Yeah. Yeah.
these. And Microsoft's been breached recently and OpenAI has been breached recently, and
Mhm.
it'll click. And then they're, instead of them just going and saying, organization, you have to shut this down, they're going to say, hey, you guys, we need to stop this. You can't use Bard, Microsoft Copilot,
Right.
but here, wait, just don't get upset.
Mhm.
Here, you can have access to all these models internally, and we'll even put it on your desktop. You can run it at home, work with IT to get it right there at your fingers.
Mm.
Coding, Code Gemma, Code Llama,
Yeah.
Deep Seek Coder, Star Coder, Wizard
Uh-huh.
Coder, Stable Code.
Right.
These are all right
Uh-huh.
there on Olama, but
Mhm.
Hugging Face for you to use.
Right, right. Yeah, and I mean, you could really just have a small task force of those specialized coding models, that where if one doesn't quite do it, you have another one that might, and you could chain together a whole little team of those. And I mean, this is nothing new for you and your ideas, okay? I love your ideas, all right? And I'm gonna let you get to that and get to those all the mini models that you've used and stuff, because having an easy interface is important, okay? So everybody, we're talking about running locally here, okay, at this point, and on basic hardware and in ways where you don't have to necessarily dual boot your system into Linux, okay? Everything that Tim has shared with me is open source and something that you can verify yourself, something that has community support, and it's exciting. And so one of the things that's always been a holdback is ease of use and interface. Where's my history? Can I make a new chat? Where is this? How do I do a vector database? Well, there's so many daunting factors for someone stepping into this to consider. And when you know that there's tools for it and you know the ones that work, it certainly makes it a lot easier. And that's a bulk of what you showed me on Monday. I was profoundly impressed with just how smooth and easy it was, how it wasn't that much different from a lot of the things that people are used to out there in terms of an interface. Okay. And as someone who's written plenty of my own interfaces to do, conversations, variety of chat, and with different tooling and extra functions built into it, I found this to be really inviting. It's like, forget what I was coding. Let's look at this. So this is so well polished. And so when I take a look at, let's see here, I'm going to bring up something here. You had mentioned a company to me called, and it's open source, it's called Flowwise. And that was a really good one.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. Oh my
yes.
gosh. Before you get there,
Yeah.
let me just express to everybody how he's not he's not underestimating or any of this, the amount of effort. I tell you, many of us tried a lot of different ways 8, 9 months ago, tried a lot of different tools. There's this little elegant recipe, okay? And it comes from, if you're Microsoft, which a lot of people are, um, there is this elegant little recipe that allows you to do all of this. And that is the combination of WSL. Okay,
Hmm.
this is the subsystem for Linux, which has its own Microsoft kernel, and you can select in WSL which operating system did I want. Okay, well, I looked today, and Ubuntu, which was released yesterday,
Hmm.
24.04 long term, is already out there. So you just say in dash dash install, you say the name of it, and you have to configure two things,
Hmm.
and you have a working
Yeah.
Linux instance that has direct access to your hardware. You
Yeah.
have to give it your username and you have to give it your password. That's it. Disk
Uh-huh.
structure,
Uh-huh.
the kernel in there, in fact, the connection to the network interface card that you have, all done for you. So
Hmm.
you do, the next step is you install, NVIDIA drivers or uh, ROCm, for AMDs. You
Hmm.
install those, okay, which is actually Ubuntu, it's in ATP or APT library.
All right.
And then you download a web interface for Olama, for the models,
That's
and
right.
the web interface that looks like OpenAI. And you go to GitHub, and the easy one is open-web UI.
Hmm.
Okay, you clone that down and you run a single script.
Yeah.
And that run script puts yeah, sorry, there was one other step up there. You have to load Docker, but you can go to the Docker engine site. It's two commands. You run you run that, and it automatically puts both a Llama and the Open Web UI into a Docker.
Hmm.
You're done.
Right.
You literally can go to localhost all privately and have access to, a API, which can be
Right.
used against the model, and a web interface that has all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
This is so
I
amazing.
mean,
Yeah.
it's about once you do it a few times and you say you mess up, you just delete it and go over. You can probably get it down to about 7 minutes.
Yeah, we've come a long way. It never was this easy years ago when it comes to just Linux and Windows. Forget AI for a minute, okay? But having the ability to just go to your command line on Windows with not really being into code or anything and just type a few commands and have Linux available. And again, this gives the direct hardware access that's so important, and without you having to dual boot your system and wait and all this and go through that. This is key because you used to not have that root level access to hardware through Windows like that for Linux. It was always Cygwin or MinGW. There were tools we used back in the early 2000s that let us get close, but never like this. Okay. And we'll have to go over some of these steps, and we'll drop some links and probably share some screens here in a minute. I have the anything LLM right up right now.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah,
would
that's
you like
another
me
little kind of
uh,
cool tool.
yeah, let me share that for people here to check out. And just this interface is really incredible here. So we're going to do this, and we don't really need
Now what he's bringing up, if he's
any.
bringing up anything LLM, that is another tool, again, free.
Hmm.
And it is a different web interface that allows for a little more functionality around storing your local context.
Mm-hmm.
One step that you would want to do, first off, you can, and I'll go back and I'll show them if you want, Open Web UI, but
Mm-hmm.
you want to use that probably first, and then probably install a vector database, again, free, Chroma DB,
Right.
then install this.
Yeah.
And that gives you the ability to have your own, vector database and collections and all that kind of stuff.
And this serves as a fine example of an open source interface solution. So everybody just take a look here. You can drag your documents into this. This is after you set it up, which is not a whole ton of steps, I'll tell you that. And then here we're looking at a chat, and they're talking directly to a document that they uploaded. So this is retrieval augmented generation live. No one's seeing your documents. None of your documents are going out to the web.
Now let's see, show them the configuration real quick. Oh yeah, you got citations. This is
Yeah.
this is this is
Yeah.
a really cool part.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
And that's where you really get to see the verification of, the paper trail, so to speak. All right, here we go. Wow, that's great. Just asking documents about formatting. And in here, you can even control the temperature of the model, it seems like. Let's see.
again, do I have the ability to actually show them from start to
Yeah,
finish real
let's
quick?
let's
A
do
little
that. We
something?
definitely want to do that. Yeah, I just wanted to show people real quick kind of what we were talking
Yeah.
about. It's a lot of words and anonymous. So let's take it to the visual level. Go ahead and share your screen and let's take a
Okay.
yeah.
Um,
Here we are.
Sorry, I've got a ton of screens, so let me make sure I'm on the right side. This is the Olama website, and to be clear, I talked about Linux installs, but if you just go to the top of it, you're going to see they've got all three platforms now, and you can actually install it directly on Windows. I don't use it because I love to have the containerization in WSL on Ubuntu. Besides which, I put other things that we'll get to in a second, but this is you can look at the shell script, but this is a single command that installs Olama, but I don't install from here. And by the way, I also have Mac. I actually go to Open Web UI,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, the reason is because when you install this stuff over and over and over again, you end up getting these little tricks. Well, one of them was installing this. Now, this used to be called Olama Web UI. It's probably why I found it early on. But from the standpoint of what happens, if you install just a single shell script, it installs both. Let me just show you real quick. It installs both of them in a single Docker
Mm-hmm.
connection. Both of these. So
Okay.
one's the Web UI and the other one's Olama. Single command. And what happens is then you can go out to port 3000 and you get access to this interface. You have to log in.
Right.
Now, they've added things about documents, and it's important to show people because it'll kind of lead into some of the questions around embedders and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's important.
Um, it is, and there's a lot of mistakes there that I've seen. But from the standpoint of right now, if I go new chat, I just installed this, there's no models out there. So what are these models? These models, remember, they contain, in essence, let's just say we don't know exactly, but let's just say the larger ones, some amount of all human knowledge, okay, that's
Mhm.
open. And so you bring that down, you never have to go back out again. It's on your computer. You might want to update it. There might be certain things, but let's say we know that Llama 3 was just dropped recently, right? And
Mhm.
there are all these different ones. Now, how do I know what I can bring down to my computer? Well, today, let's just say it relates to how much video memory you have if you want it to work quickly. You can run it off CPU, or if you have a Mac, you can have it run off of your regular RAM with a M1, M2, M3 processor. But look at this number right here and try to
Yeah.
find something that matches up that's under your amount. Now, I'll just quickly pull down, and you got to read what's the difference between a text and instruction. everybody uses different words, but let's just say instruct is like chat. It's tuned for a chat interface. If you want an assistant, then you'd grab this one. If you want to actually modify slightly, called fine tuning the model, then you'd grab this one. So let's find one that I know, that will fit. I can get this one. You just grab the name of it. You go back to here. You select settings, and you go to models and just put the name in here and just hit download. Now, depending on your internet connection, if we're having a session, you wouldn't want to do
Yeah.
this if you didn't have a good connection. But
Right. Look at that.
I have a
Nice.
good I have a good internet connection.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you better. And this is so exciting because you're flexible. You could try stuff out on the fly. It's open source. I love
You
this. This is
you got
incredibly powerful.
you've got to experiment. And what it did was it when it loaded Olama, it's basically sitting on it. It created a backend with an API, right, which is on 11.434. And that API, you can do everything. You could actually communicate directly with it in the Docker instance. I can go and if it's running in a Docker, most people, you have to know that you've got to do an exec command.
Mhm.
Um, and then you can give it that's the service, right? The container. And then you can go, and then what happens is sorry, I probably just mistyped my password. I can't type and talk at the same time, I guess.
It's all good.
So it's telling me that I have a model that's already there.
Okay.
And I could actually communicate with this model. I could just type run and then the model name, and I have a command line instance. But because we loaded the web interface, it's also here. So out of the box, now I can just select the model. And then, like we were talking earlier, I can say, you are, well, first we always go, who are you?
Ah, there we are.
So it's always a good first question, right?
Mhm.
And besides which, what's happening is the model is being laid into the video memory, right? It's being layered in. And when it does that for 5 minutes, if I go over 5 minutes of not giving it anything, it's going to unload unless I change the parameters, but it's
That's
going to tell me who it is. And then I can say, you are a senior. That's great fit for me. Da, 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 da. What are your, I didn't even spell it right, but you just have to get close. Oh,
Mhm. Wow.
that's what you're responsible for? Okay. I agree. Oh, it said compliance. Um, you work for an airline, actually a US airline. See, my responsibilities are even more critical. Data protection and passenger data. Okay. So what this has done, I put an inbound filter on it. So I know that the source material includes attributable data
Yeah.
to cybersecurity analysts, to somebody working in airlines. It's
Mhm.
it's it's then going to change when I ask it to complete text, question or whatever. Then when it goes to draw that circle around what's most likely words that come next, it's going to not include the ones, from authors 200 years ago, or even,
Yeah.
other things that were put in there. It's going to do it based off of what I've attributed,
Yes.
right, this block of information to.
Mhm.
And here, one of the things that people have to know is, like, that's just kind of out of the box, right? I haven't really done anything specific with this. By the way, I'm just going to show you real quick. You can add another model and it'll go off and compare the answer. It'll
Oh,
send it to both of them.
hey. All right.
And then you can come up here and you can look at other things. Now there's some details around this, right, that have to do with general configuration, but we also have things that you can control, such as temperature, top K, top P, like all
Mhm.
this stuff is exposed for you to play with and say, somebody said that's what it does. Try to test it yourself. Ask
Yeah.
the same
Find out.
question.
Yeah, temperature matters too. And there it is right there on the top. So
What
that,
I re what yeah, what I really like about this is there's two things that we'll get into in a second, but one has to do with why we need this whole other thing. You've had other talks on RAG,
that's
but
right.
why you need to take local context and add it and think of that as this document tab,
Mhm.
and why we need to be very precise with who we set this up as and what its task, like preset. Those in this world is called model files. And so I think those are two areas that people can learn a whole lot and decide, how to make this powerful for themselves.
Mhm.
So I won't dive into too much. I'll let you drive us. Where do you want to go next?
Well, no, just keep going because I mean, here, what we're looking at now is okay. So people have seen that you can take and pretty quickly deploy an open model, and try things out, even with more functionality than the Chat GPT OpenAI interface on their site. Okay, why pay $20 a month when you can be secure and do it at home? Okay,
Or
uh,
that's right, or the cost for enterprises of
right.
tokens,
Yeah, it's
submitting.
sure it takes the effort to set it up, and that's not for everyone, but it is
Somebody
for most people. It's not that hard. You do it.
somebody in here is probably going to ask. Let me just show you. This is at home, and so this is WSL inside of a Windows. So like you can see the Ubuntu, right? The brand new one that loads, and instead of having 6.08 kernel, whatever it's released, it's actually Microsoft produces the kernel, so it connects into your hardware.
Yep.
And here it's picking up the full GPU. It's set up the amount of memory that's available to it,
Right.
and it gives access to video card.
There we go.
So have access to CUDA, the drivers, and memory. Okay, so yes, it just so happened I was lucky. I was doing Formula One driving, simulator stuff at home. So I had a good video card. And
Uh-huh.
then I decided, wow, you know what? It's important for this too. And so then I repurposed it, for this.
Yeah.
So I do have
Uh,
an expensive one, but that allows me to play with quite a bit of
yeah.
memory to
Yeah.
do very interesting things. And so for the cost of running down to your local micro center to get, a decent video card, you can have the power of all of this, you know, very, very quickly and
Yes.
effectively in your home.
Uh-huh.
I want to say that most of the time, and this is lessons that I've learned the hard way, almost everybody that I talk to is making mistakes in this area universally. It's part of um, this understanding of, I know there's this thing called a vector database, and it sort of gives me the power of a language model. But I have traditional data stores, but I have a lot of files.
Yeah.
And so I hear people talking about like, you know, splitting and retrievers and embedding. And so there's a lot of stuff in there, right? And this is like a, an onion, which is many more layers, but this is like one of those things where there's a lot of layers to it before you get to actually an engineering decision that works. But
Right.
it's easy to make the wrong mistakes up front.
Hmm.
So if I'm taking a single file, for instance, and I'm sending that file to the model to have it evaluate, you and I know that we could cut and paste the text into the chat, right?
Right.
But these tools and our own designed pipelines create files. Well, if I add a file to this, right?
Hmm.
Um, this one starts putting it into a local vector database, right? And so we know the traditional data stores and all the different choices that we make. We have unstructured data, structured data, SQL, blah, blah, blah. But when do we need an embedder? Well, the only time you need an embedder is if you're going to use a vector database. You don't need an embedder to send a document to a file because it goes as text to the file, to the large language model, even here, and then it converts it to arrays and does the comparison and all the math.
Right.
So if I'm doing and see down here, reset vector store. if I'm going to do this, well, if I'm going to take the document and I'm going to put it into a vector database, even with this tool, out of
Mhm.
the box, it does this.
Yeah.
It says, okay, all many, but this is wrong.
Okay.
This is wrong. What do I mean it's wrong? I mean, you don't know this, but you're asking a question and it's only evaluating part of the information.
Mhm.
So if I go back to Olama
Yeah.
and I do search for all many, okay? If I look at this, this is actually an embedder. So I can download, for instance, look, I can download this. I can download this embedder, even on our interface.
Mhm.
Watch how fast that is. Embedders are really
Wow.
small. Okay,
Uh-huh.
but we're going to get into what these embedders are, but I want to go back to this. You got to go read the details.
Yes.
And when you read the details and you go to the website or you go to Hugging Face, you know what it's going to say? Anything over 256 limit is dropped. It's not evaluated. So
Wow.
only the 256. What does that mean?
You need to
This
chunk
is
it into.
context limit.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
means that if I'm going to use that, I have to come into here. I
Uh-huh.
have to set this at 256.
Right. Yep.
By the way, you'll learn this overlap generally doesn't do much, but
Okay.
sometimes there's a benefit. But then I'm going to have to select. Now, I don't like sentence transformers. And in fact, you'll know every document actually has to be treated differently.
Mhm.
This looks at everything as one way. This is why we'll get into more of the technical stuff later. You would treat the actual chunking and the taking apart and the bedding of every file type differently. You can't do that here. But one of the things I might say is, I got to refresh this probably. One of the things that I might say is that I'm going to actually do something a little different with each file type. If it's JSON, I'll do JSON. So now I'm going to use this. I got to go back down here because it just went again, 256. And then I know that I only wanted it 5. Let's say, I think 5 will do it. Let's go back and double check.
Yep.
What the heck? Why did that change that? So there's might be little bugs in here,
Uh-huh.
or oh wait, I gotta
Yeah,
hit
check it.
this.
There you go.
Now this is down. Okay, let's go back and double check. The reason that you've got to do this, because if you've saved anything, you'll find out that you got to reset your whole structure or everything messes up. So in this case, we have a nice tool that allows us to do this. And now we've gone to the maximum chunk size that it can actually store. It's going to use this embedder. It's going to use our local llama, and it's going to put it in a vector database. Now, this tool can allow you to really do some amazing tests locally, and
Mhm.
you never will need to go outside or share what you're typing with
Yeah,
anybody else.
that's it. That's it. So, let's see here. Okay, so Ram has a question here. I'm gonna bring Ram up. Here we go.
You hear me? Okay.
Hi, Ram. How are you?
I'm doing good. Okay,
Great.
one question that I have for Jim is, we just put in one document, and can we create multiple pipelines so that there is continuous feed into this? And I'm assuming we could do that.
Could you,
Let's say we can create a data pipeline and start putting in JSON objects into it.
I sort of didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
What I was alluding to was right now you just put in a document. Can we create a data pipeline or maybe some up queue or anything can be defined that we can push in data on a continuous feed as a continuous feed into this?
You can create um grab something here. There's a document. So if I take a document, a single document, it's going to store that document. Model needs to be unloaded, loaded. It should happen. Yeah, there it is. So what happened is based on, we don't, this is my one, this is the naive RAG. This is an amazing tool, but it doesn't give you all the details, probably what you're looking for. But here, what it did was it chose a splitter. It chunked it based on the instructions that I gave it, and it's in a vector database, its own. Okay, I didn't decide to set up collections with ChromaDB, but now when it's here, now I can go back and do a selection and just say, oh, here's my document. I can actually create a container of documents so that it can then, based on instructions about how many chunks, grab those and then send it up my question. But here I'm just doing a single document. What is this document? I won't even ask it to summarize. What is this document? Now, ITF strategies be the diagram illustrating. Okay. So a lot of this stuff is happening transparently from us. This is why Langsmith is one of those tools in pre-production that you really get to find a lot of power with, because you get to see what's happening behind the scenes, or you have to find places to log all of this. So I don't really like this document. It's hard to tell what it's really about, right? It's I probably wouldn't summarize it this way, but I didn't give this model any instructions up here.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a little something off, but that was a good test, right? So this is kind of cheating. This infrastructure operations, it appears to be a diagram based on the provided context, appears to be a preposition report about IT infrastructure, power research organization. Still nothing that I'm satisfied with. This is like if you gave an intern who had 25 degrees, but no real world experience, the task of going to read this document and summarizing it. Okay, it's not going to be exactly as you want it, but if you tell them this is your role, it might be different.
Okay.
So let me go back up and show you one thing here. This was the model community. A model file in the context of this is the instruction layer to the large language model. So, and this is a great site. This is done by the Open Web UI model file. So I can search for them. I'm going to show you just a quick one. Data. I'm just going to search for model files with data. And basically, these are personas that people have created, and it gives you a sense of how you can modify it. And you can see here. So I'm going to click the data scientist. Well, that's kind of cool. And so it says, from this model, as a data scientist, I possess expertise in data analysis, machine learning. Oh, it even has parameters for context, temperature, all of this.
Nice. Zero temperature.
Yeah. Yes. I know. Watch this. So now I can click get. I can put in, for us, it's going to be local host, right? We're just running off of our local machine.
That's right.
Now it's up here, but I'm going to say, you know what? Oh, shoot. I don't want it to use that one. I want it to use the model that I had. Let's come down here and I'll just do it this way. The model that, so I'm going to grab the model name right here, right? And then I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to say, oh, wait a second. I created this, but I don't want it to use the dolphin one. Maybe I've tested it and it is actually really good, but I want it to use this one. So whatever you have in here, if it's here, it's going to reconfigure a persona for you. If it's a model that you don't have, it'll download it automatically. So let's leave everything like this the same. And I'm just going to hit save. Oh, it's done. Okay.
Wow.
Well, what does that mean? Well, that means now that I can start a new chat. I can select a data scientist.
Nice.
Oh, so this is pre-done. So that means that I can then go, let's see, what happens if I give it that file? I don't even know what that file, I don't know what the file is. What is this file about? does the answer to it change based on what's happening with this file? Oh, based on the project, it appears to be a presentation report about cybersecurity about ICS systems. This is quite a bit different answer.
It is very different.
Now, it's not, doesn't, it appears to be cybersecurity related. So maybe going back down to the person that I said was this, and I said, oh, well, wait a second. Now, this is the same model, but the model file is the instructions for it over top of it. Based on my knowledge and expertise, I would say is file safety expertise and stuff like that. So, well, you provide keep calling it file.
Right.
Okay, now this is something that you need to know even when you're using the proprietary systems. Every time that you communicate with it, it's not learning from what you're saying. It's just storing the context, what you gave it in a cache format up above. And so these, you got to remember, a couple things can happen. You can go over the cache limit in the context window, or you can violate it, which Llama 3 right now, the base one that just dropped is 8K. If I get past 8K, all kinds of weird things are going to happen. And it's not going to include what I think it is. Now, people have just extended it, so I got to go download the 32K version or whatever. But it's been modified. But you've got to take into account the embedder that you're using, which is super important to know chunk size.
Okay.
And that's in your pipeline. You've got to remember, how many chunks did I give it instructions to pull? So in my questioning, where am I going to find that at? Like, oh, what's this? How many chunks? Oh, well, can I use 20? 20 times 256? Does that go over the limit? Oh, well, wait a second. If I do that, let's do something. I just changed that. Let's go back to our base model and say, you are a cyber security, nothing else about where you work, whatever. It just says what time it gets here in the morning. This is what its typical day is. I love interviewing models because it gives me a sense of, where it's pulling from. But now if I give it the document, does anything change? I hope it did save the 20K up above, because this is an important point. When you cut and paste a document in there, you are getting everything that you put in there. A lot of tweaking around airlines. There was a whole bunch of other stuff that was factored into this. Every time you're going to get a different answer. That's the beauty and the nature of a general transformer. So that doesn't sound very good. Well, it actually is. And what's important is that you use that creativity. Tim's rule number one is, and I do violate this sometimes, but by and large, rule number one, never ask a question that I can't answer. So I am letting it help me with my work by doing things faster, getting me to the point from a white piece of paper to something that I can review and argue with and update to get to a final product. So anyhow, I'm just gonna say in here, the one other thing to note is that you've got to be careful with the chunk size. Take into account the embedder. You got to take into account the embedder, where it came from, what it's endowed with respect to semantic meaning. That's a discussion for later. How many chunks that you're giving to the model's constraints around context, all the other little parameters you can change, and then you get an output. Right. And by the way, you got to decide, how much stuff did I give it already, because it's going to have it cached up there, and I could violate that one. So it's an engineer's dream, because there's a lot of things to play with. But for most of us, we've got to be careful to really test out what we're doing in that pipeline I think Raj asked about.
That's right. Yeah, wrong there. Yeah.
Rom, sorry.
Oh, and so, yeah, and I mean, like, think about this. Let's say you had a huge, tabular database of software tools, and each tool had a name and some other things like the year it came out, who created it, and some scoring on it or benchmarks, and then maybe some abstracts on those software tools. How would you approach a list of something that may or may not have all the entries in each field, but it's still approachable in terms of chunk size? I mean, um,
Let me one
uh,
of the place let me I think I know what you're saying. Let me show you one of the things that I started with was
yes, here we go.
as
This is
many people know vulnerabilities in cybersecurity, right? We have this MITRE um uh curated, it was completely by the curated vulnerability database. Okay. And so, people, CNAs submit, vulnerabilities, so let everybody know. And it comes in this structured format. Today, this is the fifth version, JSON 5 of a CVE. And you could download these, they're coming out every day. And vulnerability makes it in here, it gets approved and published, and then there's a bunch of details, but then those details change. So when a vulnerability is first known, typically it'll come out, it'll make it into here, but there's no exploit, for instance. And
yeah.
the exploit comes later. And so then they'll have to update it with things like, sorry, I have to go down here and show you. They'll come out with new attack vectors. And then because there's an exploit, the base score of severity might go from medium to critical in a matter of a minute. Like, warning. And so you have all of these things changing in this JSON. So let's say I want to bring this in. I want the LLM to look at it like the staff is looking at it. Well, JSON's great. That's the language of the internet today, right? We all of our APIs, everything else, but it's very structured. So do I just shove this JSON into a vector database and have magic happen? No. I can't not tell you how long I struggled with this. My first option was to try to take the JSON, right? This is a mind map or a map of it. But if you look at the prettified format, you see the JSON structure. Take the CVE and put it into a vector database, chunk it up. Okay, so how are we going to chunk it up? Well, we could do something like a splitter that was known for JSON that's going off of these pointers. Okay, just try to shove the whole thing in there. But then when I asked a question of it, I didn't like the response that I was getting. It wasn't really wowing me.
Mhm.
And then I learned a little bit more about what the embedders were really doing. So I originally thought, like many, listen, this is just the way we all kind of first come at it without actually having, this recent knowledge of the embedders today, is that it's taking a word like cat, it's giving it a you know a real number that associates it in space, in a vector space, and then every time cat comes up, it moves it closer to other words that it's used with or whatever. Okay,
Right.
but that's an embedder that has no knowledge, going from a random set of arrays. But
Yes.
what's happened is, when we go to things like the embedders of today, these embedders, this is just one, I'm not favoring it, but I do have 3 or 4 embedders that I like. These embedders are not that. They are the product of a large language model. So that association, which number to choose, how close to put it to another one, and which trajectory is it going in, that all comes from a large language model that was trained by a general transformer. So it is endowed with knowledge and semantic meaning. So
Mhm.
you, right out of the gate, you have an embedder that is storing it as, or to the benefit of all of that human knowledge. Well, what's in these large language models? Is it written language, like narratives? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just learning based off of JSON.
Right.
So this doesn't naturally work in the same way. And so my first thought was, okay, I gave this to somebody and I said, listen, if I was to give you this JSON, how would you turn this into a paragraph to communicate to me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, we would all do it differently, but let's just do it like the Mad Libs, let's
Yes.
create the story
Great
and then
analogy.
fill in the blanks with
Uh-huh.
what's a pointer
Right,
to
right.
each of these. So I would say,
Uh-huh.
oh, today, okay, today's date, CVE number, okay, was updated, has an updated score that is critical, has an attack vector with this description, with this systems that are, you create a story. So then what I did was I took the pointers, I pulled it from this beautiful structured stuff, stuck it into a story, and then I took the story, the whole story, and then I embedded it, split it, then embedded it, 256 chunks, throw it into a database, and then all of a sudden, wow, the responses were better. That
Right.
was like my aha moment. I've since modified that because you have inside a vector database, you have three things that are happening, right? It's storing the text, okay? It's storing metadata, and it's storing the vector arrays. And so what do you put inside that vector array to get the highest performance? You put the natural language stuff in there. So descriptions, titles, if it's structured, and it's things like this or this, then that's metadata. And so I learned to look at every file or every entity that I wanted to bring into the pipeline in its own way, and then create specific collections of data or
Mm-hmm.
agents or embedders based off the file type.
Ah, so it's not just text and numbers, it's about the internal structure more or less. Oh, in this case, I have a question from Patrick. He says, "What software are you using to make this?" And I can see it's a mind map, but how did you make this? This is a really good visual
Oh my,
tool.
oh my gosh, I didn't. If you go
You didn't?
to
Oh,
if you
okay.
go to GitHub, it's they did it for you. It's at GitHub under the CVE list 5.
Uh-huh.
So if you just go to and then you go to the CVE project, you'll find it right under here.
Okay.
But yeah, it's down here somewhere.
Okay. I'll put it
Um,
in the chat for
it's
everybody.
so cool. It's yeah, it's really useful to look at. But that was one of the big learnings, and then that took me into other file types, and then I realized mistakes that I had been making for months with PDF
Mhm.
files.
Ah, yes. I noticed that
We
it showed in your interface where you could do, what is it, OCR off of the PDF.
Well,
I know
that
that
is
gets a little weird, and we talked about
thank
multimodal. Yeah.
yeah, thank these guys for that, because
Uh-huh.
like you have to, in your pipelines, when you take a PDF, you have to realize that there's something important possibly inside of a graphic, or there might be an Excel
Yeah.
spreadsheet or whatever. You do
Hmm.
have to treat those differently. And so you have to break those pieces up and extract them. And they do a little bit for you here. Where I saw that too. Yeah.
Hmm.
So then there's different pieces, but then that model might just not work right. So you might have to give it to La Lava, a different model. And so
Hmm.
at some point, you outgrow that tool, and then you've got to get into things like, LangChain or Llama Index,
Right.
right? And then you get into
Hmm.
sites where they do all of this for you. Like
Yeah.
in this pipeline, like this is like one of those discussions that we can go back and forth on, but I did start out with LangChain, and I love it. I promise. But Llama Index is really cool, and I like all of the work that's being done by the open source community in here. And so you can select data loaders, embedders, extractors, and then you can see exactly where all of this work's been happening, and then just add it. And I'm so glad you brought up FlowWise, because many people struggle with the fact that, they can't necessarily, or they don't have a recent background in Python, but they want to do something. And then you go back to the open source community, and sure enough, somebody has done something for you. They create this no code interface, to the pipelines, and not just not just a single pipeline, but they actually create pipelines, or frameworks as they're called, for both of them. So they added Llama Index. It's not as extensive, and it's missing a llama and some other stuff, but no code interface. How cool is that?
Very
And
nice.
so you get to prototype very quickly. And let's say people have done something down here for you. This is a document reader for FlowWise, and it pulls it off of GitHub. How many times do we see manuals out there now? Pulls it down from GitHub, puts it into a vector database, and I'm going to use this template real quick. But I might not. I told you, don't use these proprietary models. Okay, well, get rid of it. And then go down here, select another one. Oh, wait, I want a llama. Now I'm going to bring this up here. And all of you who use LangChain know what's happening, right? But I don't have a Jupyter Notebook open, and I don't have any of this. And I can select right here, localhost, so forth and so on. I can select the model and everything else, temperature and some other things. And I can change the embedders, do the exact same thing. And I'm not kidding you, in 20 minutes, you can have yourself a prototype that you can extend. It even has all the code to get to it, to your website and everything else very quickly.
So you could use a tool like this, for example, to build a audio. You could chain together an audio to text tool that would then chain to something that would translate it to another language for you, and then maybe create transliteration for you to say it in that other language.
You can have what everybody ends up doing. Like, everybody works differently, but let me just tell you, for those that kind of dissect problems like me, one of the things that's really helpful is do swim lanes.
Okay.
And so you have to think, like, how did I get to that decision? This is all about decisions. Okay. How did I get to that decision from documents, from reading a website, from whatever? Okay. I thought like this, and I factored this in. Now I'm using this. Okay. Whenever you feel yourself looking at a document from a different point of view, create another swim lane. That's potentially another model persona. So in here, I would put multi-stages. These are conversational retrieval chains. So you can chain them. I would have a different model evaluating different segments of data, different collections of inside the same Chroma DB. And then you build these chains, or I'd have it go out. Oh, wait, I would check that against what's out on the internet. And then all of a sudden you can do these kind of very sophisticated chains that match up with your swim lane diagram.
Right.
And you have a prototype very quickly.
You were showing me this to try out models as well on the same prompt. I remember seeing
absolute.
It's your interviewing process here visually.
Yes. Well, I interview it ahead of time. And then I add in what I want.
You have a lot of vector stores there, sir. I just saw a few things you already have configured.
That's out of the box.
Wow.
That is out of the box.
Love it.
I know. I send messages to all these open source folks and just say, you guys are doing such an amazing job.
Good on you. Yeah, they are. They really are.
This is what makes the difference for many of us. It's the amount of work that's going into the open source community, from the open source community, is just fantastic.
And if you can't see what we're looking at because you're on the audio format, we're looking at a node-based interface that lets you drag boxes around and then connect those with lines of logic flow, and then chain together certain functions and parameters to try things out and prototype. It's phenomenal. And one of my cohorts and good friends and teammates, Mo, is with us today, and we like to use Comfy UI for stable diffusion on our own home systems. It's a wonderful interface. Um, Same type as what we're seeing today here.
Yeah. And so this is one of those things that I think this really helps, especially in prototyping phase, to give you a sense of what's going on, allows you to try a lot of different things. Once you get this little prototype working, then it gives you Python, JavaScript, but you can cut into your web page or whatever else, or just here's the curl script to go against your local instance to just try it out and use it. All you could go to production with this, and there are people that have.
You call this an ER diagram? Patrick's asking a question here.
I
Is
don't
it
know,
an
Patrick.
ER?
You might
I don't.
know. You might know
Yeah.
better than me. It's like the old business process tools, business process engineering tools.
Mhm.
But anyhow, it's fascinating, and I really, really find this is where I spend a lot of time learning very quickly, and then yes, I might jump into Jupyter Notebook with Llama Index
Right.
versus this LangChain, but you've got to try this, and there's different types of splitters, different types of embedders, and then you've got
Right.
to play around with parameters.
Right.
Yeah, anyhow, you get the idea, but it's
Mhm.
very, very, very cool. I don't know if anybody else has found other tools that are useful, but there's a ton. This is kind of like my little recipe book to get most people started.
Yeah. It's powerful for sure.
And, and let me tell you, there's when we really get into very interesting stuff here is when not only you have a chain of models that are handing off the results, right? There's one in here that looks at your inventory of food, and then it hands off the inventory to one that is a persona of a chef that's cooking you something today. And like people have played around, made some fun stuff. But then there are these ones that you start to realize that you are the one that's testing it out. Like you're the one that's giving it feedback. But
Right.
why not have some of the models do it based on these personas? And I saw 2AI, but here's another one, Crew AI. And all of a sudden, we can have Crew AI, in other words, two models, could even be different ones, different personas, checking each other's work, having them go back and debate. And you can get some very interesting things all done locally, all done for
Right.
free.
Heard good things about this too. I know we were talking about this just recently, and I know you're getting into it, but I've heard great things about this for a few weeks now, and I'm so glad to get to take a look at it with you here. And
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole concept of agentic
mhm.
or possibly agentic configurations that we're going to be in. In other words, there's two ways that you deploy Gen AI. By and large, sorry, we could all debate words here, but it's either as an assistant, okay, and that's what we typically think of as like us chatting with it, or as an agent. And
Yes.
agent doesn't have to be completely autonomous. You could just give it
Right.
from a zero shot, a few
Mhm.
pieces of information that creates the persona, and then a single task.
Right.
And that task could then the result of it could go back to you.
Right.
But the concept of an agent, first off, being refined for something, it's a large language model, but refined for a task, and then maybe even giving it access to a tool.
Oh yeah,
Like
that's
maybe
right.
give it access, let
Right.
it get a function.
A
Let it,
plugin. Yeah,
that's
like a
right. Let it go
plugin. Yeah.
scrape the internet. Let it go communicate
Yeah.
with your seam or
Yeah.
your repository on your network. Have it
Right.
take that and then bring the data back,
Yeah.
process it, and feed it off to another one.
Right. And
So
there's,
this,
it's like a Scholar AI or Wolfram Mathematics, and you could have it reach out through other APIs and connect to their databases and say their data sets. And then there's, what is it, 200 million peer-reviewed papers in Scholar AI. And then you have it plug into, Zotero, for looking at, citations and stuff. I mean, you can ultimately your agent can be authenticated to log in or to be logged in, authenticated, and then do a write, do a post, operate with actual commands.
yeah, I was
Actually,
going to tell you real quick,
mhm.
Andrew. I saw a presentation by Andrew Ng just
Mhm.
recently, and he brought up the 4 ways that people are finding to really improve the output or the fidelity of the models used in certain cases. And I think the first one is super, super important that he talks about. It's called reflection.
Mhm.
And specifically if you're in coding, right? If you're asking it to code. So if I grab one of these models, these code ones, and I bring it up and I say, okay, produce me a function that does whatever. What they found is that the first time it comes back, okay, that's the leaderboard. That's kind of like what we're seeing. But really, you should always deploy reflection, which is then you take what it gave you, even in another chat session, give it back to it and say, I want you to, make it more efficient or blah, 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 or just take another look at this or take a look at this and see how would you improve it or something. That concept of reflection ends up producing high quality results or much higher with the same model. So why not do this with your own work? And then it goes to the next step. Well, why not have other models, right? For instance, in Korea, do the reflection part for you. And so this is where we are all learning this at the same time. And everybody should be out there playing around and just put it right in here. Have it try it. Oh, I lost audio. You're on mute.
Here we go. That's okay. It's just a great way to create methods of, hey, there's a company that has a particular type of report. They've got hundreds of thousands of this type of report, and you could build a routine based on an embedding routine based on the structure of those reports. Just like we were talking about using metadata that's already in place without computing so much, just by taking the built-in structure and deploying it differently. In conjunction with other techniques, I'm just saying that I have so many ideas from today. That's,
Well,
uh,
let me
this,
add one thing in there from
mhm,
something I saw in the past
right.
and I think a lot of people here are playing with RAG. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And what they're thinking about is that it requires or that they just went there. It's going to vectorize to a database that is vector
Mhm.
database, and so they've upserted data in there. But remember, local context to get the power of it, especially if it's precision data,
Mhm.
never put it into a vector database. Oh, what do? That means that almost every real production RAG pipeline,
Mhm.
right, is going to have multiple data store types. So only part of it's in a vector database. So then
Yeah.
you use your traditional BI or your database, right? I'm not going to pull everything out of a seam and put it into a vector database.
Yeah, right.
So, but I might not, one of the problems that we have is might not have somebody, 24/7 who can write a SQL query based on
Uh-huh.
something new comes up. So then you
Right.
have the model feed the question that it wants answered of the traditional database. It feed it to a node, which is basically a large language model called like this, duck DB,
Mhm.
NoSQL. You feed it in the schema and it spits out the SQL server, which the SQL query statement, which then goes to your traditional data store, pulls that data back, puts it in chunks, sends it on down the line.
Mhm.
You got to remember that we need to use all of the data stores. And yes, vector databases are cool, but it's only actually a small part of
That's
the
right.
data.
That's right. Absolutely. I feel that. Let's see. Okay, Ram has got a question. Let me bring Ram back up here for us. Okay, Ram. There we are. What's your question, Ram?
Question would be that
You're gonna have to speak up a little bit more. We cannot hear you.
you're able to hear me now.
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay. So what I was alluding to was that the vector database will actually contain the schema definitions or the ER diagrams so that it can prompt the queries out and show it to a traditional database and get the results. Is that what would be a better approach? I mean, what we're saying here?
You would see a schema
Yeah.
is very precise. So the first thing is to know is to never put precision data in a vector database. So you put
Okay.
the schema into a flat file, and then you feed the flat file into the pipeline, which goes to this model. So since the schema doesn't change, that's a model of your database. You never put it into something like a vector database. You take that schema in a flat file, you feed the flat file into this model, and you say, here's what I want to get out of it in natural language. It uses the natural language associated with the large language model, then the fine tuning to produce a SQL Server statement that goes against the schema.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Daniel.
There we are.
Yeah,
Good.
Daniel.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
all right. Let's see here. So when it comes to local vector databases and embedders and whatnot, I saw, we all talk about Chroma a whole lot. And when you said vector stores are only a part of this, have you had much experience with PostgreSQL with its pgvec plugin, or do you know about that?
I do know about it.
Yeah,
I do.
or
But the thing is that once you start getting used to, well, first off, I saw the guy speak who is the founder of ChromaDB.
Mhm.
And I have confidence, at least from his presentation, that this is going to stay open and free. And I love that. And not that he shouldn't make money off of it some way and host it, but I think it's just great. And
Right.
so he created ChromaDB. It is SQLite 3, whatever. You can see structurally what it is, but
Right.
it's storing these arrays, and you get used to using it. And so, I think it's just free, simple, fast. And I'm sure there are lots of others, and I've tried some of them. But, for the most part,
Mhm.
this API gives you what you need
Yeah.
to prototype.
Got a question from Deepak. Good to see you, Deepak.
Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Tim. Actually, this is really good. So one question I have in this text to SQL DuckDB, I'm not sure,
Oh, yeah.
how much you paid, but my question is actually, this is one, kind of, one question basically which I get it is this particular schema does not have any metadata there actually for each and every column. So when we just give a schema of a table or a database, right? And we ask a question in a natural language, how does it translate actually a particular natural language specific, query that we are asking to a particular column, etc. Because there is no metadata involved here actually, if it's just a simple schema of a table or nothing else.
Right. So here's where you're getting into the fact that, there are certain amounts of text which are in your schema. And depending on how you name those columns, depending on how you name the table, like that the ability for a human to read it and to discern what it is, basically to reverse engineer, is dependent on how much text that you've put in here that makes sense to them. So if I give one of these models Ada code, let's say I'm not an Ada programmer, but I give it Ada code, it's going to figure out what that program is doing a little bit easier because of all of the self-documentation and all of that. So if your schema, your massively complex schema, is difficult to reverse engineer, it's going to be difficult for the model to do it. And so you've got to think about what I do with that. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do. One is that we haven't gotten this far, but you're using, this is a model that has been fine-tuned, right, from a large language model to be good at this. There's no reason why you can't fine-tune even Llama 3 to do the exact same thing this is doing, but fine-tune it based off of 50 or 75 cases using your schema. So you give it the schema, which is hard for anybody to understand. The person that actually is your DBA, who can translate the way the application uses it, writes the answer. You get 150 cases of this, and then you can fine tune a model, and you'll find that's where you start getting performances in your specific case.
Very nice. Ram?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that fact. Maybe this brings us, or maybe this brings us back to our fundamental data ERD settings where we need to have table comments table and column comments, which which will make the model adapt and maybe channelize the answers correctly. Let's say a column called ID or maybe date, some date, DT would mean, let's say, pickup date or end date. So you just have to add a table comment to it, or a data dictionary approach, which will actually help us solve the problem.
I absolutely agree. Like, the thing that we have to remember, like, keep in the back of your mind, we anthropomorphize like tech all the time. But in this case, the model is assuming a persona. It is endowed with human knowledge, but it's flawed just like we are, and it's limited just like we are. So give it the information that you would give to a really smart intern to reverse engineer your data structure. Like, give it the details, and you can teach it to understand.
I see. That's, yeah, it's a.
Do you mind if I show this real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so this plays in with this, and I just keep it in the back of my mind every time I think about like where I should deploy this, how I should think about overcoming, problems today, maybe rethinking problems in the past, or just finding out flaws in my own thinking. So by and large, we are limited, okay, in 4 general ways to make correct decisions today. Now, all of cognitive biases, I think there's 209 or whatever, there's 200 and something. These cognitive biases, like recency bias and so forth and so on, these cognitive biases are what keep us alive, right? It kept us alive, but it doesn't suit us in this really complex world of business that we're in today because of data, and we just didn't evolve to handle all this. So we come up with wrong decisions all the time, or we conclude wrong decisions. But by and large, these 4 areas are where we have problems, okay? We're trying to make a decision, okay, but we have too much information. And so our brains just can't handle it. Okay, that just happens.
Right.
Gen AI can help us with that. There's not enough meaning, like we don't see the meaning in it to help us make a decision, but there is one.
Right.
Another one is, these 2 across the way are really impactful right off the bat. This other one is, we have to make a decision fast. In cybersecurity, we get this all the time. Something came out, and if we could make a decision in 15 minutes, we could probably stop an attack. But holy cow, it's complex. So we need to act fast, but we make the wrong decision because we're trying to act fast. This is where Gen AI can help us again. And then what should we remember? We have a limit to what we can remember, what is impactful, and even our own memories, right, can be manipulated. We know that if I tell you, I say this is a fact, but it's wrong, oxymoron, and then I repeat it a couple hours later, even though I told you it's wrong, you're going to believe it. It's just the way our brains work, right? And this is one of those things that they've tested. So we get stuff wrong. In the case of a large language model, and the reason that we deploy Gen AI is to overcome these 4 general areas.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does. And it's just, it's kind of also the whole hallucination topic that we were talking about the other day, and how no, we're using it because it hallucinates. And so I think that, that conversation has helped me refine a few things for myself, but my internal verbiage is such that the train of thought gets derailed. It gets a little off. And I don't really say that's so much of a hallucination. Okay. But it is something where I was able to wrangle it and eliminate a lot of that type of confusion in a conversation for myself when I employed my own scheme for, long-term memory. Something I built last year, or like half a year ago or something. And it was phenomenal, but it is hallucinating the entire time, technically speaking. Yeah, that's right.
That's the purpose of it.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
the beauty of it.
If
you were to try to take hallucination out, then you get to a precision tool. This is not a precision tool. This is not about precision. So the more you try to get it out, the more for the data science folks, if they're on the thing, the more you overtrain. And when you overtrain, then you lose its reasoning ability, you lose access
Yes.
to data, you're
Yeah.
messing up.
Right.
So everybody talks about hallucination as a negative connotation, but it's
Yeah.
actually the defining characteristic of the technology. And it
Mhm.
is the one that allows you to use it very
Mhm.
powerfully.
Right, right. And I think that's just maintaining episodic memory versus trying to prevent hallucination, which is really impossible in a system like that. So that's kind of where I went with it, was episodic memory, which was maintaining a categorized long-term research database of things we've talked about, from snippets of actual conversation, which were not training data. Like we said, it was just it was just in its short term, but to go back on that and to be able to continue a conversation, I thought it was really powerful. And from any chat prompt, from any conversation, I could access that episodic memory in a very simple SQLite 3 database that was, a Python library away, just on my local hard drive. And it worked wonders. And I wasn't doing any vector store or anything like that. Okay. And I was able to have access to all that data without missing anything, which I thought was pretty powerful. But it's not as fast as, what we need for large data. For big data, you can't do what I was doing. It's not scalable. But it was
I'll
great personal
th-
research. It was wonderful.
it's funny because this is I think he came out, I can't remember his name, sorry. The guy, I loved his story, and you got to go find it on YouTube. But
Uh-huh.
he's been interviewed, the person that created Quiver, and he was talking about his girlfriend going away one weekend. I think he's French. His girlfriend going away one weekend, so he had a little extra time on his hands, and so he brought out the and created Quiver, which is his ancillary brain.
Uh-huh.
And that's one of the first things that I saw, that I was like, when I thought about what he was doing with this,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, holy cow, you mean I spent all of that time becoming a MUX engineer? I didn't need to. Like, I know I've dumped it all in the past, and I could have just given it all the manuals from Nortel, Nortel switches, and I could have just asked the little brain questions, and I could
Right.
have just configured it. And so what you just said is like rethink the way that you've gained knowledge, the way that you use that knowledge in your job, and and basically turn yourself into a problem solver.
Yeah.
Use all of that cognitive ability in a different way. Don't worry about storing every random knowledge and expertise. Basically create a little store, could be a vector, with a large language model that has access to manuals, knowledge that even you created, put it in there. And then when you want to ask a question of what was normally something random in your head, go ask it. Have it pull it out.
Right.
So you
Right.
should have a team of people working for you.
Mm-hmm.
And those team of people are personas, like data scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And you should have one of those for every role that you find useful in your
Yeah.
job. Could be a cyber analyst for me, or
Uh-huh.
threat analyst, or whatever. Have those in there, and then feed them different tasks.
Right. You had a list of nearly 30.
I know.
Did you show
I have it.
let's
I
talk.
have it on another internal system. I just tried to bring up
Yeah.
something close, but I keep about 75 models that I probably
Uh-huh.
use.
It's
Pretty. So
once you get
these are
set up with a system like this, it's
these
just
are
it's
these
just
are
great.
personas.
But it's look at that. Look how many there are there, everybody. That's
I mean,
incredible.
right. Some are
Yeah.
for have a visual component, right?
Uh-huh.
Multimodal or a different mode.
Sure.
Some are personas. Some are like this one's La Lava for video
Uh-huh.
imagery. But a lot of them are taken on. Doomsday Survivalist, somebody put out there, I thought was kind of cool. There's medical ones. The thing to do is to create these, and this is probably the easiest way to go learn it. Here's Emilio, very intelligent software developer, blah, 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 contract analyzer, data scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Bashbot.
There we go.
Bashbot.
That's
This
something that's really good. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm telling you, go out to the community and see what
Uh-huh.
they've created, because there's some really fun stuff out there,
Oh,
and
right.
to get you thinking. Here are the
Uh-huh.
top model
Yeah.
files.
Uh-huh.
Here's one. Oh, there's one in here that's a companion that's psychologist. There's all kinds of things people have tried, and it's
Right.
very interesting.
And because this is open source and we're looking at Open Web UI, which I shared with everybody in the chat here. So, one of the things I do when I build my chat interfaces, okay, and this is for personal stuff and prototyping, is that I'll use something pretty basic. It's not really, it's showing me my chat history in a session, but I don't have multiple sessions, okay? But I'm able to pass through commands. For example, I built this software called Chat with Your Files, and it just accesses your local computer as a RAG system, and it gives access to the model, whatever context and content are coming off of your hard drive. So I was able to pass commands to it in the chat, like CD, change directory, or like dir if you want to do it like that, and then give it arguments, and it would go to that directory. But it was passing those arguments to a Python script that managed that under the hood, and then would bring that information back to the LLM and the screen. Because when I first wrote it, it was just printing it to the screen, but the model had no idea what was there. So then in my versions and in fixing it, I made it to where it was aware of what we were doing. So in a situation like this, where we're looking at your local computers, so it's the web page that's being served on your local computer. On the back end of this stuff, it's open source, so anybody can take a crack at the code and start inserting their own special functions. That would be safe to say here.
All in a an Anaconda instance or whatever, running right here on your totally protected WSL. No one can get access to it but your system.
Yeah,
I end up spending most of my time in there or on a browser interface going back to my own computer.
Yeah, and the wild thing here is that, like, everybody's so used to pretty quick response time when it comes to chats, okay? And you ask a big question, it's going to take a minute to chew on it, but then they're spitting it out. But one of the things I don't want anyone to take for granted is the fact that, hey, we're looking at Tim's computer, and it's the one doing all the compute here, not OpenAI. And it's happening really fast with these open models. And I haven't seen anything concerning come out of any of the demonstrations that you've shown me between Monday and now. It's been incredible speed plus accuracy, or at least feasibility for, where it's on the rails.
Somebody's already created this template for you. You can download. This one is, I forget what it was called, like multi-chat, but here's 3 different retrievers based on what you ask. It'll go to 3 different data stores. Here's one with Chroma, Supabase, and then Pinecone. And this stuff is, I can't stress enough how easy it is to do it. This is every technology. Like, if you think about like where we started in the 1990s, right? A lot of things had to progress to get to where we're at today. Somewhere along that way, it went from the realm of computer engineers to home user. Like there was this evolution. What happened with Gen AI, because of its nature of being natural language and the way that we actually interface with it and all the open source, it's now progressed in 1 year to the applied person, to the applied scenario. Like literally anybody can do this. And you can have it tell you how to do it. Like, this is now at the point where it is for us, all of us, to use and learn, and we will think about things that no data science person ever thought.
Right. And so, yeah, exactly. And I know that I think you brought up, data scientists being careful with the way they're processing some of this, but do you have any, remarks overall in general for the approach of people out there? I know that for some examples in this world, our good friend Patrick, he says, if you overanalyze something, you're gonna overfit, you're gonna miss the actual content you're looking for, and with in geology even, and detecting things underground. If you don't follow that natural pattern of the system, you're gonna overfit, you're gonna miss things. you're going to overprocess something. You're going to vectorize something you don't need to vectorize, essentially, like you were saying. How we manage things as metadata versus trying to take everything in when we don't really need to. Go ahead.
This is why I don't use AI as a term in communication unless I preset this is what we're talking about. So think about all the disciplines: expert system, neural network, and then machine learning, deep learning, and then somewhere down at the bottom here is Gen AI. Okay, this generative transformer, which literally came about from a single paper written in 2017, I think it was led by Ash Vaswani. That paper and those 7 people who didn't achieve what they wanted to achieve on that project created this paper. Attention is all you need. What we're using today came from that, all recent. Well, that little piece, that domain inside of the larger branch of AI, artificial intelligence, is not about precision. But what's right above it is. And so machine learning is there to find anomalies and patterns in very specific data sets, which are you transform, you clean, you da-da-da-da. But as you move down, you move to this like magic that happens when you throw all human knowledge in there without really thinking about it and predetermining, and all of a sudden you get some interesting reasoning and production on the answers to your questions. So part of it's for precision, and then part of it not for precision, for creativity.
Yeah. There we go. Very good points there. Let's see here. Wow. Do you have any other links that you would like to share with everyone here, or any other resources that I could put in the chat that would?
I'll send it to you, but I mean, a lot of us learn differently. I think from the standpoint of, we were talking about how we learn, which is a little different. I'm an autodidact, so I pull stuff down. I don't know if people learn through YouTube, but YouTube is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't actually done the whole run it locally or anything, Matt Williams, I think he used to work for Olama, doesn't anymore, but he has these like bite-size 8 to 11 minute videos, which will help you get something installed, like what I just showed you. And there's things that I would tweak on what he talked when he gets up into RAG and obetters, but the stuff about how to get Olama running. And he's even doing now some explanation of some of the interfaces to it. Super, super helpful. And so in 8 to 10 minutes, he'll show you how to install it. So that's I think fantastic.
Okay, I put that in the chat for everybody. Here we go.
And if you want to back into the whole thing about the model itself, model building, tensors and CUDA and what all that is. I think some of you took MIT courses. If you're going to look for like courses from Stanford and MIT on deep learning, do me a favor. In whatever you do in machine learning, deep learning, don't try to avoid any video or class that was written before March of 2023 or done before that.
There you go.
Make sure stay recent, because then what they'll do is they'll add in yeah, here's what a tensor is, blah 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 blah, and then they'll relate it to a lot of the more recent work with what's happening, because a lot of this stuff that you want to learn, it's only been around 8 months.
That's right. Yeah, it's so fresh. We can't use old knowledge. I mean, it's just like every week I have to be ready to pivot. Every day I have to be ready to pivot my perspective, to what's new. I mean, that's the whole point of being ready to learn, and but it can be a bit overwhelming. There's a lot. I think something I mentioned to you Monday was that there's a lot of frameworks out there coming up, and every so many weeks or less, there's a new one. And I know we've talked about things like DSPY, and to no great length, but we bring up certain things every once in a while that it helps streamline, but it's something else you have to learn. And it's just like, oh goodness, can't we just find a cleaner approach to all of this? And what you've showed us today has been a real great step in that direction, it seems like.
For
Ludwig.
those that want to go a little bit further down the line or already there, this this little this little literally YAML configuration allows you to get into fine tuning. And so I think the guy who wrote this worked at Uber, and you can go watch the videos out there. And he created Ludwig. And basically with a single YAML file, you can create and take these base models and start tweaking them for you. So very, very, this is what I'm talking about. The open source community is, it's worth getting involved with it now and using this stuff because it's benefiting all of us, and no one knows where this is going to be a year from now.
That's right. Yeah.
I think most of us know that large language models and generative AI isn't going to get to general intelligence. I think everybody's pretty much realizes that these guys, right, may have the missing piece. And I believe in 10 years, we're going to have elementary school kids who can draw an artificial intelligence, okay, AGI. And I believe that large language models, Gen AI, is going to be there, but it'll be akin to like the reptilian brain and short-term memory. The frontal lobes might be these guys, because this is I think, is it Dr. Freeze? He has a different point of view on artificial intelligence, and he created this principle called free energy principle. And basically, an argument is that a 2-year-old is intelligent, and you don't have to give it all of human knowledge to get it to adulthood, right? And so it's experience, it's sense. And so I haven't seen anything, but they have a very valid argument why they think they're close to AGI and they're the only ones that can get super intelligence. Who knows what it is, but there will be lots of pieces that fit in there, just like our human brain structure.
Right. There's a lot. And recently I've been studying these findings that because the reason a child can have more intelligence is that there's so much redundancy in the environment to give it footing and to give it context and to the over and over and over again. And here's an outlier, here's an exception. With that redundancy helps create an entrainment and alignment with the environment and the body, the agent, the real agent, itself. But yeah, when you say, I like that, like the drawing of the brain will change. It won't just be this normal shape. It will be these parts that reflect a certain way, and even like what you said, well, if it's too old, you want to stay current, right? So in the last 6 months or so, Mamba, I think I mentioned that to you, as state space models that do not use transforms or transformer-less might be a really good approach for certain tasks, and that not these things is going to do it all, because again, we're mimicking the neural network of the human brain, and that morphology of the neuron itself. Just think about you have a conversation where you know someone really well and you finish their sentences. What are you doing? You're predicting, or someone who's freestyling, someone who's doing slam poetry or whatever, someone who's doing something live or ad lib. They're predicting what should come next, or in some cases, what someone might say. And therein lies this wonderful bridge between what we're building and what we're built on, and to see all that interplay is just fascinating, and gives me lots of emphasis to continue creating and exploring. So, but anyway, look, I can't thank you enough for coming out and taking the time with us today. We had some great questions. You made a lot of people happy with your answers. I'm looking at the chat here, and there's so much to dig into on this. I hope everybody please save these links here in the chat and take a look. I mean, again, we went over FlowWise, we went over anything LLM, and also that Open Web UI is really important. That's what we were using on our systems to actually have the chat sessions. Okay. And there's a lot of instructions out there for this. If you have a company that your business needs help and you would like Tim's actual kind and conscientious help, Tim's company here, let's see, want to give you a shout out here. LLMstrategicsolutions.com. And I'm going to go put this in here for everybody.
Yeah.
We are. And this is great. And you work with groups very well and have a keen eye on this. So,
Oh, I love getting people started on this because
yeah.
you see you have that moment where your eyes just go like, wow, wait a second. This is going to be cool. This is cool. This is going to help me.
I felt at home with the interface you showed me. I think that if someone's going to adopt something, it needs to be very readily functional, familiar design cues. Oh, the car has a door. I can open it and get into it. Great. Excellent. Because there's stuff out there where it's daunting and you're like, where do I start? But this is plain and simple. And, yes, it's technical to get it going, but it's not super technical. And you're not really, it's a code-free experience past a certain point. You're running a few command line codes. You're not writing a program, and you're telling the computer to install some things. You're configuring a few things. Yes, you have to make some choices and decisions on a few things, but
try it, blow it away, start over.
Exactly. And that's right. And because you're not going to hose your system doing this. Okay. These things aren't set up to get online and just start, doing things. These are not agents. This takes work, but not a whole lot to make happen. And so, but I'm excited. I know I have a few machines I'm getting ready for this, and one I have almost finished setting up just for this occasion. So, but anyways, that's that. Do you have any closing remarks for anybody out there?
No, I mean, really, just think about how you can bring this into your life, because one of the things that I would recommend is that you set a goal, even just, let's say, just an hour a day. An hour of my day, I'm going to use this. Just try it in the simplest way. I'll give you one very, very impactful thing, and that is, that as our stress level goes up, right? Fight or flight, amygdala, what happens is our reasoning ability goes down. If you're stressed out and you're getting an email and you need to respond to it, take the email, shove it in there and have it see how it would respond. What it does is it takes a little stress away because you have something to work with, and you enable your critical thinking. And so you just added that to your life. You found a way to make it useful, and you might be responding in a different way to an email.
Right. Lower your cortisol, everybody. Like, take some stress away. Use those assistants. Like, you're not alone. You have a team, but you have to be at the helm of that team, and you have to be ready, willing to use it. I mean, that's what I have. I definitely have that, but I'm about to start building my own team of these, as you have shown us how. So, but it's incredible. But anyway, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming out. This has been show number 4 with Tim Rohrbaugh. And I can't wait to talk to you again and see what you do in the future with this. It was amazing to meet another creative mind and someone who's enthusiastic about others learning this for themselves and their own betterment. So
thank you for having me, Daniel.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. So to everybody out there, thank you so much for coming. This is the AI Think Tank podcast. I'm Dan Wilson with Tim Rohrbaugh here. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you again next week.